All right, everyone, let's get right into this. My goal tonight is to guide you through a little goal setting session. My specific goal is to actually challenge your goals this year so that you can truly find what inspires you to live a healthy and happy life. We are going to talk about goal setting just in general, but we're going to really spend the majority of our time around building habits. First, it's important for you to understand that for 90+% of us, information is not our problem. So if you're here to gain new information about how to lose weight or what to eat or how to exercise, that is not going to be our objective tonight. We all have access to this information, and by doing enough reading, enough research, we can uncover answers to everything. We can fix a car, we can learn a new language, and obviously we can answer any of our health and wellness needs. The real thing that I'm here for is to provide you with, and not just myself, but my team, my coaching team, is that we're here to provide you with clarity of the information, and that's where we all struggle. What's right, what's wrong, and due to the vast amount of information that is available to us on the internet, how do we separate that good information from all of that noise? So our first goal is, or my first goal tonight, is going to be to help you understand what your real problem is. And that's really the objective of any goal setting session, or should be the objective to a goal setting session, is the goal that you're coming to the table with, is that the real goal? And if you're thinking to yourself right now, I know my problem, and this is what it is, then great. Then really it's going to be really easy for us and the team here at Blended to ultimately figure out how to help you. And that's just going to be a matter of finding the right information that you need in order to fix the problem. Let's use an example. For many of you, the problem isn't knowing what foods to eat. Your problem is that you can't stop yourself from eating the things you know you shouldn't be eating. So if we dive in from here, remember that I am generalizing this conversation because every single person is different. You are starting at a different part of your journey, or you have a different end goal. And that is assuming, of course, that you ultimately know what that goal is. Let's start by taking a moment. And if you're watching this as a recording, then you can pause this and take as long as you need. But I want you to take a moment and think, what has to happen for you to be happy a year from now? If you believe your answer to happiness is to lose 20 pounds, but you kind of look back at last year and you've gone through this process before and you've lost 20 pounds in the past, but you've just gone and put it back on, then I want you to take more time and I want you to create more clarity with what your goal is, because losing 20 pounds wasn't enough. That obviously was not the goal. And let me also be clear, you're not listening to this for me to tell you step by step how to achieve your goal. That doesn't work. And there's too much data and information to show you that just following a routine or someone else's routine typically does not work. And that's usually because it's my goal, not your goal. I'm here to change your mindset. I want to help you realize that ultimately this is all up to you. You are the only one who can decide how to make these changes. We do not get what we want in life. We get what we deserve. So the real question, once you come up with the answer from my above question, is why? Why is that going to make you happy? And this is going to be how you determine ultimately what your goal is. So let's go through a hypothetical scenario to help you understand this process a little bit better. So let's assume that you tell me that your goal is to lose 20 pounds. That's what will make you happy. And I ask why. You say, well, I'm overweight. And I ask, well, why are you overweight? And you say, because I spend my evenings watching TV and snacking. Well, why are you spending your evenings watching TV and snacking? Well, it's because I'm bored and I have nothing else to do. Why is that? Because I'm single and all of my friends are married. So the purpose of kind of going through this hypothetical scenario is to like really make you understand like why is it that that's your goal, and you need to really become super clear on that first. So before we get into habits and building these habits out, there's a theory, it's my own theory that I want to take you through, which I refer to as the Hourglass Theory. If you haven't heard me talk about this in the past, basically the concept to it is that I don't believe we are ever or we aren't always chasing a specific goal, such as losing 20 pounds. In my example before, we're chasing the feeling that we believe it will bring us. And that's ultimately what we need to figure out. And for me, it's trying to find happiness. And I've come to realize, and I think we can all agree, that there's no one that's happy 100% of the time. So my objective in life became, how can I become happy more often than anyone else? And think of like some of the things that you've said you'd be happy about, and you've probably said the following words a lot. I certainly have. I'll be happy when. So let's use some examples. I'll be happy when I get the new iPhone, or I'll be happy when I get married to this man or woman of my dreams, or I'll be happy when I get a promotion at work. What I've realized, and where the Hourglass Theory came into play, was that really through these expansions that blended over the last 8 years, we've gone through so many of them, and Kim would always tease me about them as we kind of went through this process, saying, and I'd be like, this is the last one. This is like what's going to make me happy. And I came to realize that process, that specific renovation, it only made me happy for like a moment in time. And so the whole idea around pursuing excellence was actually formulated around that same time, because the pursuit of excellence was actually what made me happy. So every time I made a renovation, I was happy for a moment, and then it was a matter of pursuing that next moment. Using our location as an example, always looking to improve the facility, the equipment, that aspect of it, just one side of the business, that physical component of it. That was a way for me to find more moments of happiness. So let's look at a graph here. This is basically the idea around the steps to happiness. And so this is also the process of establishing or setting up for those specific goals that you want to work towards. And let's, for the purpose of this conversation, use our health and fitness as the goal. And let's just assume that it's 20 pounds just to keep things on point. So I've set a mindset or a goal. So I've declared my mindset of being, that is my ultimate goal. That is what will make me happy. What I need to do next is I need to start establishing, this is where the information comes into play. I need to start establishing what sort of health things, such as sleep, nutrition, hydration, the body of, and the foundation ultimately of our health, what of those things do I need to do in order to achieve that specific goal? From there, we can sprinkle in the step 3, which is the fitness part. So if I drink this much water, get this much sleep, eat this food, and I train this way, then I should be able to achieve this specific goal. There's one more part to it that I think is really important, and this comes down to a flip in this graph. And this is why I call it the Hourglass Theory. As you can see from this diagram, step number 5 is simply understanding that achieving that goal is simply a moment, and that moment will bring us happiness. And let's use some examples here. I think that the best example is actually just using ourselves and life as a whole. So when we watch kids walk for the first time, oftentimes we see complete joy from the kid. The fact that they've accomplished this task of walking. But if you look ahead at life now, for most of us walking to and from our car, we don't celebrate that moment like we celebrate a toddler learning how to walk for the first time. Nor if we went back to elementary school, and when we did indeed graduate from elementary school, that moment, graduating from elementary school, was seemingly a big deal. We were super pumped that we are moving potentially to junior high. But if you went back to elementary school today, and you had to graduate, and you had to do that by basic timetables, addition, subtraction, like whatever's in the curriculum of elementary school. If you went through that process today for a second time as an adult, you would not nearly be as happy. And we see this progression throughout our entire life. We see it when we graduate school. We see it when we end up getting married. We see it when we buy our first car or we buy our first house. I mean, how many people, when you get your first house, super exciting, one of the biggest purchases you've probably made in your life at that moment in time. But when you buy your second or third home, it's not nearly that same experience. So my point of this is that those all represent moments of happiness. The pursuit of excellence is a matter of trying to achieve as many of those moments as you possibly can. And those moments don't just simply live in our health and our wellness world. And, it's a matter of establishing these different goals that we want to set for ourselves and realizing that when we achieve them, there's going to be a flip of this hourglass. And when that flips, we have to re-establish a new mindset, because all the sand is now at the top of the hourglass and it's going to start filling in towards the bottom of that hourglass. So our number one objective whenever we establish or reach a goal is to, number one, establish a new mindset. And what does that mindset need to be in order to establish or reach that next goal? And for many of us, there are ongoing fitness and health and wellness goals. But if we're really realistic with ourselves, the real question that I'm posing to you is, how far do you want to take it? For me personally, I have more or less established my health and fitness goals at this point in my life. They will adapt and they may change, but for the most part, my goal was to be able to be happy enough that I could go and play hockey on Friday afternoons. I could give my niece and nephew a run for their money if we're outside playing around and playing basketball or whatever it may be. The objective was essentially to establish a very general health foundation that was going to allow me to live my life to the fullest, which if I were to establish that and be able to tread water in that spot or maintain that level of fitness, again, a switch in mindset of these are essentially the things that I need to eat. This is how often I need to exercise. This is how I need to sleep. And this is how much water I need to drink on a day-to-day basis in order to maintain that level of fitness and health. Then it would allow me to focus my energy towards other areas of my life that essentially are going to help me achieve moments of happiness. And those moments, again, are going to continue to change and continue to alter themselves as we go through life. It's just a matter of always continuously changing that mindset and reestablishing that baseline from there. This is a very quick review of what I call the Hourglass Theory. And hopefully it helps you understand that these goals that you're setting are simply moments of happiness. And what I want you to do is I want you to think about what is going to be bringing you happiness in 2021, both how that means, what that means from a health and wellness perspective, and how that part of your life is going to allow you to find other moments of happiness in other areas or goals, whether it's professionally or socially or whatever that may be. So the next thing that I want to review is, I don't have a better name for it, but essentially your calendar of life, which is really kind of starting to lay out what your year needs to look like in order for you to achieve those goals. So I pulled out a calendar of 2021, and as you can see from this calendar, I have already circled, approximately 14, 15 days. Now my suggestion would be going back every single month, bringing this calendar back out and looking specifically at that month of what maybe changes are in there. What I've labeled here in this current calendar are a number of things. In January, I've circled the 23rd. I already know that I have, assuming that we don't have any holdbacks with COVID-19, but I have a family event that I'm going to that evening. We call it wine night, and that night I will basically enjoy wine and food with my family. That needs to be associated in there when I look at my overall wellness and health goals. I've also labeled out June, which is mine and Kimberly's birthday, which really Kimberly's birthday is the only one that matters. October, we again, a family event, Thanksgiving, and then Christmas. I just circled a whole bunch of days. We've just gone through this. I know that week is super hard for a lot of us, and ultimately I like enjoying that week, and somewhere within there, hopefully you'll be circling out some vacation days and some other days such as significance or your kids' birthdays. So once you establish all of that, the question is going back again to those moments of happiness, and this is kind of where SMART, like using the SMART goals that we're all familiar with. And if you're not familiar with it, just do a quick Google search. Again, information is there. Just kind of do a quick Google search and you'll get the understanding of what SMART goals are. But when we look at the calendar, the question is, at what point through this year do we expect to hit these different moments of happiness, those pinnacle moments that I was referring to? So if I use this month as my example, and I again use the world of health and wellness and what I want to achieve this year in that regard, and I look at this month, then I need to know that if I'm going to overindulge on the 23rd, I need to probably find some balance within the week prior to that. And that might mean that I'm a little bit more diligent with my nutrition that week, and the weekend before, maybe I tighten up my nutrition just a little bit so that I can enjoy and not worry about the next weekend. But at the end of the day, for me, this is all about balance. If we again use a different example, and your goal is to lose 20 pounds, let's say for an example, we know that every pound equals 3,500 calories. So if our goal is to lose 20 pounds, then if I do some quick mental math here, ultimately we need to figure out how to reduce our caloric intake by about 70,000 calories. Now, again, don't expect to do this over the course of a day or a week. What is a realistic timeline to lose 20 pounds? Well, if we break up that math over the course of a week, and we put ourselves into a 3,500 calorie deficit each week, that means that we'll essentially establish a 1 pound decrease in weight, assuming that our hydration is not affected in a positive or negative way that week, is we'll lose 1 pound of weight that week. Now, again, using my example here in January, if I'm planning out my month and my goal is to lose weight, and I want to lose a pound every week, I'm probably not looking at a goal of losing 4 pounds this month. I might set a goal of trying to lose 3 pounds this month, where that third week where I'm going to be out at the event on the 23rd is that, and I want to indulge that week, is that week is essentially around maintenance. I need to find a way to not be in a calorie deficit, but also to not ruin my progress and be in an extreme calorie excess. So setting a very specific goal where that goal for January is to lose 3 pounds. Now, the objective here is to kind of lay out your year to determine where that's all going to fit into place and what sort of SMART timelines that you're going to put in place to essentially achieve these goals. And again, the smaller we can break down those goals, the better it is, because if we break those goals into smaller components, it allows us to celebrate each one of those components. So instead of saying my goal is 20 pounds and having that as the ultimate goal, it could be that I want to lose, 3 pounds in the month of January. And based on the calendar of events, I want to lose 4 pounds in the month of February, and so on and so forth. So once you kind of set those miniature or micro goals, that gives you that opportunity to hit more, potentially smaller, but more moments of happiness. All right, so the crux of this entire process revolves around what is called the habit loop. And if you've read The Power of Habit or Atomic Habit, this is a review. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend both books. What we're going to go through, however, is essentially going to break down the two. The habit loop itself is a neurological loop that governs any habit, and it consists of 3 elements: a cue, a routine, and a reward. Now, understanding these different elements can help you understand how to change bad habits, but as well how to form new habits. And we'll use an example here. We're going to use the example that they use from The Power of Habit, which was done with researchers from MIT. They took a maze and placed a rat inside the maze. They also placed probes inside the rat's skull and then put them inside this maze. While the rat wandered inside the maze to get the chocolate, at the end of the maze, the researchers monitored its brain activity. So there's 2 different graphs of brain activity that I want to show you. The first few rounds that had the rat out going through the maze, you can notice that the brain activity throughout the entire course and process was really, really quite high. When the maze opened up, there was that clicking sound, there was that initial spike in brain activity. As they made their way down the initial corridor of the maze, their brain activity stayed pretty high. When they get to the T point, they turn right or left. Again, lots of brain activity. And then eventually when they hit the chocolate, that was the reward. They achieved the reward and there was a spike in their brain activity. What's interesting is as the rats went through that process, after several rounds of doing it, they saw a pretty significant change in brain activity and the process that the rats went through. First off, there was a higher, there was more brain activity at the initial click of the maze, so when the process started. Then there was really low brain activity through the middle portion of the kind of maze. And what they also noticed was the rats basically didn't meander throughout the course. They were a little bit more direct, and they go right to the top of the T, they take a left, and they get to the chocolate, at which point they would see another spike in that process. So what we learned from this is that the cue for this example was the clicking noise, that initial click when the maze started, and we saw a big increase in brain activity at that point. The rat then went through the routine of moving through the maze, which once it established that habit, the brain activity required to get through the maze went down. The speed of going through that maze actually went up. And then when it achieved its reward, the chocolate, there was yet again another spike of brain activity, and that was essentially the habit loop. Now, what's interesting is that this habit loop happens to be the same for humans. Consider the act of brushing our teeth. As soon as we wake up in the morning, that bad smell in our mouth acts as the cue. Without even thinking, we execute the routine and brush our teeth. The reward after brushing our teeth is having clean teeth and fresh breath. This process within our brain is a 3-step loop. First, there's a cue, a trigger that tells your brain to go into an automatic mode and which habit to use. Then there's the routine, which can be physical, mental, or emotional. And then finally, there's a reward, which helps your brain figure out if this particular loop is worth remembering for the future. So over time, this loop, the cue, the routine, and the reward become more and more automatic. There was also an experiment done with a monkey named Julio. And one day this monkey was positioned in front of a computer monitor. And the job of the monkey was to essentially touch a lever whenever a color shape object appeared on the monitor. And if he touched the monitor or touched the lever when the shape appeared, then he'd be rewarded with a drop of blackberry juice. Now, after repeating the same experiment several times, he established this habit loop. And what's interesting is when we look at the data, so the brain activity that was monitored, there's something interesting that was noticed. So take a look at the image on the left-hand side. During the first few rounds, the brain activity spiked when the monkey received the blackberry juice. But as the experiment continued, the brain activity started spiking when the cue appeared on the screen, not when he received the juice. So the monkey started associating the cue with the reward. As soon as the monkey saw the cue, it started to crave that reward. This craving is extremely powerful, and it drives our habit loop. This is how new habits are created. By putting together a cue, a routine, and a reward, and then cultivating a craving that drives the loop. Take, for instance, one of my daily habits. When I wake up in the morning, 99.9% of the time I have a coffee. My brain anticipates that caffeine, the reward, and just the plain thought of it or the smell of it can increase that craving. I actually get excited about the first cup of coffee of the day, or the thought of it before I even drink it. All right, so I want to bring this all together, and I want to talk about how you create cues within your day. Some of you may have heard me talk about Dave's rules. Dave's rules are my personal cues that I'm referencing, but there's 5 different ways to establish them. Number 1 is through time cues, and time is perhaps the most common way we trigger new habits. So think of your morning habits as an example, and we see this with successful people posted on social media all the time. We wake up in the morning and we have a cascade of different habits that happen. It could be we go to the bathroom, we take a shower, we brush our teeth, we get dressed, we make a cup of coffee, and so on and so forth. But as an example, if you pay attention, you may also notice that you repeat certain tasks mindlessly at different points during the day. So let's assume that you're at work. There might be a certain time of the day that you head off to get a snack. And there might also be a certain day and time of the week where you specifically watch a certain TV show, and so on and so forth. It's these patterns that either establish bad habits or good habits. And if it's a bad habit, then you might want to take stock of how you feel at that time. In many cases, your habits are actually signals of how you feel. So it might be that you're bored. Maybe your afternoon snacking habit is a way of breaking up your monotony of the day. Maybe you're lonely. So maybe coming to the gym is a way for you to connect with your friends. The point is, if you understand the reason why these habits pop up at the same time each day, then it can become easier to find a new habit to fill that void. The second one would be a location. So there's cues that are established with locations. If you've ever walked into your kitchen, seen a plate of cookies on the counter and eaten them just because they're there in front of you, then you understand the power of location on our behavior. In my opinion, location or the environment is one of the most important drivers of mindless habits, and also the least recognized within our routines. In many cases, our habits and behaviors are simply a response to the environment that surrounds us. However, location-based cues are not simply things we respond to, they can also be things we create. So new habits are actually easier to perform in new locations. One theory to this is that we mentally assign habits to a particular location. This means that all of the current places that you're familiar with, your home, your office, and so on and so forth, already have behaviors or habits and routines assigned to them. If you want to build new habits in these very familiar locations, then you need to overcome the cues that your brain already has assigned to these areas. Meanwhile, building a new habit in a new location is like having a blank slate. you don't have to overcome any pre-existing triggers. So sometimes location cues are really, really effective cues if used properly. Another cue is preceding events, and many habits are a response to something else that happens in your life. Use your phone as an example. It buzzes, it cues you to pick it up and read the latest text message or notification. These are examples of habits that are triggered to an event, such as the buzz. When it comes to cues that are useful for building new habits, I personally find preceding events to be one of the most useful ways of doing it. So once you understand habit stacking, you can develop all sorts of ways to tie new habits into preceding events. For example, when I make my morning coffee, I will often meditate for 2 or 3 minutes once I finish making it while it cools off. These are really effective ways of creating new cues. The fourth example of cues is specifically an emotional state. And in my experience, I find emotional states are often the cue for bad habits. So for example, the habit of eating when you feel depressed, or online shopping because you feel bored. It's very hard to associate emotional states for like a good habit. However, there is a way that I use it, and it's more mental health than anything. But I find when I'm starting to notice that I'm holding a lot of tension in my body and experiencing stress, that I will use a deep breathing habit that Daryl taught me. And essentially what I do is I follow a 3-1-5 breathing pattern. So 3 seconds in, pause for a second, and then a long 5-second breath out. And I'll usually repeat this for a sequence of like 3 to 5 minutes. And I find that this little breathing exercise is a great instant stress reliever. And particularly it's useful because you can literally do it anywhere. And then the last cue to kind of take a peek at is with other people. So it's probably no surprise that the people you surround yourself can play a role in your habit and behaviors. And what may be a surprise is just how big of an impact that these people can have on you. There's actually a study done in the New England Journal of Medicine that found if your friends become obese, then your risk of obesity increases by 57%. And that's even if your friend lives hundreds of miles away. So as far as I can tell, the best way to make this information is effective is to surround yourself with people who have the habits that you want to have yourself. There's a famous saying that goes, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I truly believe that's the truth. It's just a harder habit to establish because friendships do run deep, but you can always convince your friends to get on board with you. So this year I want you to think about setting goals a little bit different. The first step is going to really dive deep into understanding why you want to accomplish a specific goal. What is it about that goal that is going to make you happy? 2 is understanding based off of your calendar of events, this is where that SMART aspect comes into, SMART goal setting, but how you're going to establish that goal over a specific time period, and then breaking that goal up into some smaller chunks so that you can get some wins along the way. And then last but not least is really truly understanding that what you're setting is not specific goals, but it's what habits do you want to establish and live with every single day of your life. And once you can establish and figure out exactly what habits you want to make up your day, then from there you can really truly determine what your goal is going to be. And if your goal is not realistic or does not align with the habits that you want on a day-to-day basis, then that's when you really should be having a deeper conversation with a coach and specifically with a coach that potentially can help you align those goals and those habits so that they get as close as they possibly can. So working with one of our coaches towards a very specific nutrition goal, if it's to put on any sort of like muscle mass or to take off any sort of body fat, that's a really deep conversation that you want to have one-on-one with a coach. And if it's a strength-based goal or a skill-based goal, again, we've got coaches here that are really excited to be working with you and helping you establish those goals. And last but not least, remember not to forget about any sort of mental mindset goals. Being mindful, grateful, and learning how to control your mind and your mindset is probably one of the most important skills to learn, and one of the skills that will provide you with with the most happiness long term. So, saying all of that, let's take this off of the recording now, and let's go live for some Q&A.